what motivates us to do what we do? The short answer is the release of dopamine in the reward pathways of the brain. Hi there, I'm Yvette, and welcome to another Neuro Coffee Break, where neuroscience topics are explained simply in the time it takes to sip a cup of coffee. So, cheers, and let's go. So, what is the reward pathway? The reward pathway in the brain involves multiple regions, with key areas including the ventral tegmental area, or VTA for short, in the midbrain, the nucleus accumbens in the striatum, and the prefrontal cortex. When the VTA is activated, two main pathways come into play, the mesolimbic and the mesocortical pathways. The mesolimbic pathway projects mainly from the VTA to the nucleus accumbens, which acts as an interface to other parts of the limbic system, like the amygdala, which adds emotional depth, and the hippocampus, which adds contextual understanding. Meanwhile, the mesocortical pathway consists of axons from the VTA neurons projecting into the prefrontal cortex. This adds a complex dimension to the system, as the prefrontal cortex is associated with decision-making and planning. This pathway is believed to link the feelings and emotions experienced with the original stimulus, which aids in remembering specific cues for future reference. So, how does the reward pathway work? The core of the reward pathway lies in the brain's dopaminergic system, where neurons utilize dopamine as their neurotransmitter for communication. Within the dopaminergic system, there are four distinct pathways, two of which are the mesocortical and mesolimbic pathways involved in the reward pathway. Surprisingly, dopamine release doesn't directly create pleasure from an activity or substance. Instead, it plays a pivotal role in fueling our desires and motivations. In fact, the brain experiences a surge in dopamine in anticipation of a potential reward, further highlighting its role in wanting rather than in liking. Crucially, the intensity and speed of dopamine release shape our experiences, as a swift and abundant release intensifies the addictive nature of substances in our brains. So, how is the reward pathway involved in addiction? Natural rewards, like food and substances abused by humans, elevate mesolimbic dopamine levels, although the latter are more potent stimulants. Stimulants such as cocaine and amphetamine directly stimulate the dopaminergic signal. Cocaine blocks the dopamine reabsorption at the presynapse, whereas amphetamines increase dopamine release. In both cases, one ends up with more dopamine in the presynaptic cleft and for longer. On the other hand, non-stimulant drugs indirectly affect the mesolimbic pathway by stimulating the release of dopamine in the nucleus accumbens through various methods. For example, in the case of alcohol, it disinhibits the GABAergic activity onto the VTA, resulting in a surge of dopamine in the nucleus accumbens. In general, continued drug use activates the mesolimbic pathway, heightening the drug's incentive value. Over repeated exposure, the intake of the substance becomes a habit. That is, when the brain learns and memorizes everything related to this drug. Usually, these addiction memories are tied to either an environmental or situational cue. For example, one drinks beer when watching a football game. Therefore, every time that there's a football game on TV, that is the cue, one gets a craving for drinking beer. These memories are thought to inhabit the mesolimbic circuitry, particularly the amygdala, as the studies show that rodents with an ablated amygdala are not able to associate an environment with a drug anymore. Eventually, with addiction, drug-related circuitry replaces higher-order neuronal circuitry, which is related to food, sex, and shelter, and starts to favor decision-making processes towards drug acquisition and ingestion. So, how does stress influence the reward pathway in addiction? Stress plays a significant role in triggering relapses in addicted patients. The stress circuit influences the reward pathway in two ways: the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, or HPA for short, and the extrahypothalamic corticotropin releasing factor, or CRF for short. When the HPA axis is activated due to stress, a series of relay messages go through the hypothalamus to the pituitary gland to the adrenal glands to finally release glucocorticoids such as cortisol. Stress interacts with the mesolimbic dopamine system, as glucocorticoids cross the blood-brain barrier and bind to the glucocorticoid receptors in the brain. In this case, the VTA has these receptors and therefore it is stimulated. So, as you can see, this interaction has an activating role on mesolimbic dopamine, similar to that observed in substances of abuse. In addition, when stressed, the production of a neuropeptide called corticotropin releasing factor is increased. This neuropeptide is known for its anxiety-inducing effect, as the amygdala responds strongly to CRF. The surge of these negative feelings can fuel the relapse in addicted individuals. So this was the reward pathway and its relation to addiction in a nutshell. If you like this video, you might like another video from the Neuro Coffee Break. Otherwise, there is this one on the effects of music on the brain. And with that in mind, thanks for watching and see you next time. Ciao!